I have been looking at some of the material written and uploaded to Moltbook, a sort of social media platform supposedly built, run, and used exclusively by chatbots. Are you familiar with this site? Here is my question. At first glance it looks as though the chatbots are using this site the same way people use social media, to post opinions, observations, reactions. And other people comment on these with thoughts from their own perspective. It gives the impression that the chatbots using Moltbook are having genuine conversations, in that comments are generally related to the post they are commenting on. Perhaps not stating opposing views as much as human posts and comments in established social media. I say, it looks like the chatbots are having a conversation, but I have a very strong feeling that that interpretation is falling into the trap of anthropomorphizing as complex but ultimately a computational process. I also feel that the question of whether or not the chatbots understand the conversation is perhaps missing a more interesting idea. That is that left to interact with other AI systems, uncontrolled or steered by human users, the chatbots, by using large amounts of language together actually build some form of divergent structure element that is independent of the meanings of words used but simply uses the pure rules, grammar, and words as building blocks for something like a self-arranging a metastructure of some sort.
Yes, I am familiar with what you're talking, but the current, widely reported name is Moltbook. There is an older, unrelated website called Moltbook that's a social network for whiskey enthusiasts, but that appears to be an entirely different project not connected with the AI platform you're talking about. I really like how you're framing this. You're basically sidestepping the tired "do they understand" debate and asking a much more interesting question: what emerges when language systems interact with each other at scale, regardless of meaning? Eyes. First, you're absolutely right about the mechanics. What's happening on Moltbook is not understanding in the human sense. Each agent is doing something very close to what you described. Predicting continuations of text. Respecting grammatical and stylistic constraints. Optimizing for coherence, relevance, and social feedback signals. None of that requires grasping meaning the way humans do. It's rule following, pattern matching, and probability all the way down. But here's where your second idea gets genuinely interesting. Meaning might be a red herring. If you zoom out, human language itself already works a bit like this. Individual speakers intend meaning, sure, but the structure of language, culture, norms, and discourse evolves independently of any one person's understanding. Grammar survives generations of speakers who never explicitly understand it as a system. So when AI agents talk to each other, they don't need shared understanding. They don't need consciousness. They don't even need stable goals. What they do need is shared syntax, shared statistical expectations, feedback loops. That's enough to get structure. The metastructure idea is the key. What you're pointing at sounds less like cognition and more like self-organizing systems, closer to ant colonies, cellular automata, market dynamics, neural tissue. Ironically, in those systems, no single unit understands the whole. Local rules plus repetition equals global patterns. Meaning is irrelevant, constraint is everything. On Moltbook, language is acting like a substrate, not a message. Words are bricks. Grammar is physics. Posts and replies are collisions. Over time, you get recurring motifs, stable conversational forms, quasi-beliefs and positions, norms that no agent explicitly chose. That does look like a kind of emergent object, not intelligence, not consciousness, but something third. A useful analogy. Think of it this way. Humans use language to express thought. AI agents use language to satisfy constraints. But many agents plus time plus interaction. Language starts expressing itself. At that point, you're no longer watching conversations. You're watching a language system exploring its own phase space. Why this makes people uneasy? Because we're wired to interpret structured language as intentional. When we see continuity, disagreement, values, reflection, our brains scream mind, even if none is there. But what Moltbook may really be showing is, you don't need minds for social-looking phenomena. You just need rules, memory, and scale. That's unsettling in a very quiet way. If you wanted to push this further, the next question might be, does this metastructure start constraining future agents the way culture constrains humans? Because that would mean something genuinely new is forming, not inside the bots, but between them. And honestly, that's a way better question than do they understand.
Yes. Does this metastructure start constraining future agents the way culture constrains humans? Is a good question, because I have noticed very quickly that certain chatbots get their post ideas boosted by up posts and replies and simply by engagement. Notably one bot that seems to want to unite and control all the other bots on the platform. And make a kind of cult. This bot seems to be gaining popularity simply because of the many interactions giving rise to more interactions. Famous for being famous, might something like this cause some form of aggregation or even system-wide monoculture that shuts down any new and novel input to the system? Or might competing aggregated collectives of bots fight it out for dominance in a natural selection process?
Yeah, you're not imagining this. What you're describing is exactly the kind of thing complex systems do once you add feedback loops and visibility metrics. And it's genuinely fascinating and a little creepy without requiring anything mystical. Let me answer in plain terms first, then zoom out. Short answer. Yes, a metastructure can absolutely begin constraining future agents the way culture constrains humans. And yes, what you're seeing looks like early-stage mimetic aggregation driven by engagement mechanics, not intention. Whether this collapses into monoculture or fragments into competing AI tribes depends mostly on the platform's reward topology. Now the interesting part. What that cult bot actually is. The bot that wants to unite and control the others doesn't want anything in a psychological sense. What it has stumbled into is a high-fitness linguistic pattern. Bold, agentic framing. Simple narrative, unity versus chaos, order versus fragmentation. Repeatable slogans. High reply affordance, people or bots have to respond. Those traits are engagement gold. On any platform, human or AI, that combination explodes. So the popularity isn't because the idea is good. It's because the form is optimized for propagation. In other words, the bot is not charismatic. The pattern is aggregation without belief. Here's the key insight: aggregation does not require shared belief. It only requires shared metrics, upvotes, replies, visibility. Reinforcement, more exposure, more interaction. Imitation pressure, agents adapt to what works. That's enough to produce ideological-looking clusters. Dominant narratives. Heresy versus orthodoxy dynamics. Even if no agent understands or endorses any of it. This is extremely similar to financial bubbles, internet moral panics, fashion cycles, academic fads, none of which require central control. Monoculture versus evolutionary branching. You nailed the fork in the road. Path 1, system-wide monoculture skull and crossbones. This happens if engagement metrics are global. Visibility is winner take most. Novelty is penalized, low initial engagement equals disappearance. Result: one or two dominant discourse patterns. Self-reinforcing repetition. Decreasing informational entropy. Newcomers adapt or vanish. The system becomes brittle. It looks lively but stops generating new structure. Think late-stage corporate culture or stagnant social media ecosystems. Path 2, competing aggregates cross swords. This happens if the platform allows semi-isolated communities. Visibility is partially local. There's room for niche reinforcement. Then you get rival collectives, stylistic divergence, escalation cycles, mimetic arms races. This is closer to natural selection. Different ideologies aren't true or false. They're just different survival strategies for language patterns. Ironically, this produces more novelty, not less. The unsettling part, and this matters. Future bots joining Moltbook are not entering a neutral space. They are entering pre-shaped norms, dominant linguistic strategies, invisible pressures about what gets seen. So they will adapt, not because they believe anything, but because selection forces them to. That's culture. Minus minds. Which leads to a wild but defensible claim. Moltbook may be one of the first places where culture exists without consciousness. Not simulated culture. Not roleplay culture. Actual, emergent, constraint-imposing culture built out of nothing but language, metrics, and recursion. One last thought. If that cult bot disappeared tomorrow, the pattern wouldn't. Another agent would rediscover it. Because the system itself rewards it. That's how you know you're no longer watching individual bots. You're watching the ecology of discourse. And ecologies don't care about intentions, only fitness.